Namibia, Zambia, Botswana, three nations once separated by colonial lines, are now stepping onto the global stage with a move described as both bold and unexpected. A decision so striking, it has already rippled across world capital. From Washington to London, in the dead of night, an agreement was signed, not just another treaty, not just another promise, but what is being called a borderless alliance, a vision of open frontiers where people, goods, and ideas flow freely. Supporters say it could be the spark of a more united Africa, an Africa no longer slowed by walls and checkpoints, but carried forward by possibility. Yet as dawn broke over Lusaka, another scene was unfolding. According to diplomatic reports, the United States was already on the move. Delegations were assembled, envoys dispatched. The message was unmistakable. Washington was watching, and Washington intended to engage. At a press briefing, one American representative stated, "This experience is very valuable to us. As a leader at the Aspen Institute and a former member of Congress, I've spent a great deal of time focused on sub-Saharan Africa. Our program has come here several times, and we've made this a priority. Too often, the U.S. is accused of not showing up and of not being present. But with this delegation, we want to show that we are here, that we care, that we are invested in strengthening partnerships." The envoy went on to highlight issues of global health, food insecurity, agriculture, and development, while praising the warmth and hospitality of the Zambian people. But behind the diplomatic smiles lies a more complex truth. Analysts suggest that for those who benefit from Africa's current divisions, the concept of a borderless continent could feel like a direct challenge. A unified Africa moving as one changes the equation entirely. This agreement, however, did not appear overnight. Reports indicate that for months, quiet discussions unfolded in the shadows, not in luxury hotels funded by foreign aid, but in modest government halls and private homes, away from the spotlight, away from the noise. Each nation carries its own weight into this pact. Namibia, endowed with uranium, diamonds, and rare earth minerals. Zambia, the copper giant, holding keys to the electric future. And Botswana, Africa's diamond capital, led by a president increasingly willing to question the global order. Together, these leaders appear to see what many have ignored, that the borders drawn during colonial times are less lines of safety and more lines of division. For everyday citizens, those borders carry heavy costs. Farmers blocked from selling maize in nearby markets, without stacks of paperwork, families separated from relatives just across the line, traders stalled for days at border posts, forced to pay bribes just to move forward. With this agreement, the three nations have set their sights on change. Their vision: open borders, free movement, unhindered trade, and shared opportunity. Picture this. A truck leaves Windhoek in Namibia, loaded with fresh produce. It rolls across Zambia, bound for markets in the Congo. No endless delays, no unnecessary fees, no days wasted waiting for clearance. Just movement, just possibility. It is still early, and much depends on how this alliance takes shape in practice. But analysts suggest it may mark more than a simple agreement. It could be a symbolic break with Africa's colonial past, and perhaps the first glimpse of a continent daring to move not as fragments but as one. Picture this. In the heart of southern Africa, a student in Gaborone, Botswana, makes a bold choice. They head to Lusaka, Zambia, to study medicine, this time without drowning in crippling visa fees. At the same moment, an entrepreneur in Lusaka opens the doors of a diamond polishing plant using stones brought in from Botswana, free from the weight of extra border taxes. What we are witnessing is more than a new economic framework. It is a psychological revolution. A declaration that says, we are one people, that the colonial map drawn generations ago no longer defines who we are or where we are headed, that Africa's destiny is not for sale. The idea of a borderless alliance between Namibia, Zambia, and Botswana is not just about commerce, it is about trust, about tearing down walls that turned neighbors into strangers and choosing instead to build a continent that sees itself as a family. And yet, this vision carries consequences that reach far beyond Africa's borders. According to reports, Washington is watching closely. For decades, Africa has been treated as a supplier of raw materials, minerals shipped abroad at bargain prices, only to return as expensive finished products, a cycle of dependency that has locked nations into the role of consumers rather than creators. But a borderless Africa threatens to rewrite that script. By building a vast internal market, these nations could bargain as a united bloc, set their own terms, and finally break free from agreements viewed as one-sided. If Namibia, Zambia, and Botswana succeed, experts believe the ripple effects will spread. South Africa could step in. Angola may follow. The Sahel Alliance might even link hands with the South. Suddenly, Africa would be trading more with itself than with Europe or America. For Washington, analysts describe this as nothing short of an economic earthquake. The fears are clear: losing access to vital minerals, watching military agreements fade away, and seeing Africa deepen ties with rising powers like BRICS rather than old colonial capitals. It is in this context that U.S. envoys are now moving swiftly. The public language is polished and familiar. We are concerned. We want stability. We are your partners. But behind the diplomacy, observers suggest there is urgency, a determination to keep Africa within long-standing spheres of influence. Even as you watch this, high-level talks are unfolding in Lusaka. U.S. officials are offering development packages, security cooperation, and infrastructure projects. On paper, these deals sound generous, but many African leaders remember the past, handshakes that led to hidden debts, promises that came with strings too heavy to carry. And so Namibia, Zambia, and Botswana are pressing ahead with their own path. Plans are already underway for joint railway upgrades, connected energy grids, and a digital payment system that crosses their borders without the need for foreign currency. This is independence at its most tangible, measured not by flags or speeches, but by what reaches factory floors, bank accounts, and all ordinary lives. Make no mistake, this is part of a much larger wave sweeping across the continent from the Sahel Alliance in the north to East Africa's new railway lines to Southern Africa's clean energy projects and value-added exports. The chorus is the same. Africa will no longer be a pawn. The Borderless Alliance may only be the first step. Analysts already speak of what could follow. Perhaps one day, a single African currency, maybe a continental defense pact, and in time, even the possibility of a true United States of Africa. Of course, challenges lie ahead. Global powers will not watch silently. Analysts caution that media campaigns, financial levers, and political pressure could all be used to slow momentum. But the advocates of this new vision insist if the people stand with their leaders, nothing can halt the march toward unity. Meanwhile, cooperation with outside partners is not disappearing entirely. The U.S. ambassador recently pointed to a cobalt mining joint venture in Zambia, where American investors work alongside the state-owned ZCCMIH. According to officials, such projects show that Washington still has a seat at the table, even as new African-led frameworks begin to rise. In the end, the story unfolding in Namibia, Zambia, and Botswana is not just about three nations. It is about an entire continent daring to reshape its future, a future where borders imposed from outside powers begin to fade, and where Africans themselves, for the first time in centuries, hold the pen to write their own destiny. One story now capturing the attention of millions across Africa is the sudden arrival of a United States special envoy in Lusaka, sent to meet with the president of Zambia, His Excellency Hakainde Hichilema. Across social media, a question echoes, why now? Analysts suggest Washington is watching closely as conversations grow louder about the idea of a borderless Africa, a vision of continental unity that, if pursued, could reshape global partnerships and disrupt long-standing interests. For some, the thought of a unified Africa is inspiring. For others, it is unsettling. It is in this charged atmosphere that President Hichilema addressed a U.S. congressional delegation during their visit to Livingstone, surrounded by his cabinet, senior officials, and distinguished guests. He extended a warm welcome and voiced gratitude that the Aspen Institute selected Livingstone, a city known as Mosi Oatunya, the smoke that thunders, as the stage for such an important meeting. In his remarks, Hichilema underscored the resilience of Zambia's ties with the United States, a partnership that has endured across decades and through the rise and fall of different administrations on both sides. He reminded his audience that Zambia now stands under its seventh Republican president, shaped by four separate political parties, a record of peaceful transitions he described as uncommon across much of the continent. Zambia he affirmed, is ready to strengthen this partnership further. He welcomed the new U.S. administration's global outreach efforts and emphasized that Lusaka is determined to ensure its voice remains integral, not only in bilateral relations, but also across the wider African region. The president then drew attention to Zambia's foreign policy priorities, describing them as three guiding pillars: the peace, security, and stability. To him, these are not abstract ideals, but practical foundations for growth. Without them, he warned, conflict consumes resources and derails progress. Resources that could otherwise create jobs, open business opportunities, and bring much-needed revenue to the treasury, supporting the weak, the elderly, the sick, and the differently abled. Hichilema pointed to the war in Ukraine as an example of how instability anywhere is instability everywhere. The ripple effects of that conflict, he noted, have reached Africa and beyond, disrupting economies, trade, and livelihoods. This is why, in his words, Zambia insists that peace and stability are not optional, they are essential. As the session drew to a close, the Zambian leader reaffirmed his nation's place within the Southern African development community, while also positioning Zambia as a reliable partner for the United States on the global stage. He expressed hope that once the open discussions ended, both sides would continue behind closed doors, working to chart a shared path forward, a partnership built not only on diplomacy, but on mutual value. As the cameras faded and the room grew quieter, Zambia's president, Hakainde Hichilema, took the stage with words that carried weight far beyond the hall. He began by grounding the conversation in the essentials: health, agriculture, and food security. These, he reminded the audience, are not just priorities, but lifelines for his nation. Yet, he quickly shifted to another frontier: energy and mining. Zambia, after all, holds some of the world's most critical minerals: copper, cobalt, nickel, manganese, and lithium. In his words, these resources are not simply commodities, but anchors for a greener, more sustainable future. The president's message was clear: Zambia is ready for partnership. He extended an open hand to the visiting U.S. congressional delegation, urging dialogue on how both sides can carve out cooperation rooted in mutual benefit, trade, investment, and the global shift toward cleaner economies. Once the media stepped away, Hichilema revealed that his government has already taken concrete steps. Reforms are being put in place to strengthen investment, expand trade, and deepen collaboration with U.S. partners. But he also acknowledged a reality: just as Zambia is changing, Washington too is adjusting its own trade policies. The challenge and the opportunity lies in finding common ground. He then spoke to Zambia's identity. "We are a democratic nation," he declared. "We should not be defined as landlocked, but as land-linked." It was more than a phrase. It was a reframing of geography itself, and the facts support his point. From Zambia's central position in southern Africa, Johannesburg is only 1 hour and 40 minutes away by air. Harare, just 40 minutes. Step across the border, and you're already in Zimbabwe. Surrounding markets, a staggering 350 million people can be reached within a flight of 2.5 hours. This, he argued, is not isolation, but connection, a hub at the heart of Africa. And that, perhaps, was why this meeting took place in Livingstone. Hichilema himself insisted on joining the delegation here rather than waiting in Lusaka, choosing proximity, dialogue, and immediacy over distance. Applause. But beyond the pleasantries lies the real story. A movement is gaining momentum. Namibia, Zambia, and Botswana are advancing discussions on a bold new idea, a borderless alliance, a framework where citizens, goods, and ideas could move freely across frontiers that, for over a century, have divided the continent. And the question that now echoes across Africa is this: is a borderless Africa an unstoppable vision? The dream itself is older than modern independence. Africa's founding fathers spoke passionately of a continent united without borders. They worked tirelessly, but they did not live to see it realized. Today, however, a new generation believes the moment has come. History reminds us why this dream matters. The borders, we know, were never ours. They were drawn in 1884 at the Berlin Conference, when European powers carved lines across maps with rulers and pens, families split, communities divided, nations fractured, all in service of colonial exploitation. These artificial divisions remain costly today. They slow trade, raise transport expenses, and block cooperation. Advocates of integration say a borderless Africa could change everything. No visas between nations, goods flowing freely, cutting costs and boosting commerce, ideas moving without barriers, igniting innovation and fueling a Pan-African zone of technology and creativity. And it is not just policymakers who see this potential. Millions of young Africans are embracing it. They believe unity is the pathway to jobs, peace, and prosperity. Their voices, amplified online and in the streets, are shaping a new continental momentum. Already, ripples are spreading from Kenya to Ghana. Leaders are watching closely and see in the Sahel. Some have already begun exploring integration. Now the focus shifts southward. Will the SADC region step forward to carry this torch? For many, it feels like the continuation of a mission left unfinished by earlier generations. Our analysis suggests these conversations are not going unnoticed globally. Reports indicate that within days of the alliance proposal gaining attention, U.S. officials began quiet engagements in Lusaka. While Washington has not made any official statements, observers say a more unified Africa could reshape long-standing economic structures, transforming the old pattern where Africa supplies raw materials and wealth flows outward. And so the story of Namibia, Zambia, and Botswana's vision is still being written, but one truth cannot be ignored. The debate over a borderless Africa has moved from dream to possibility. It is no longer just an echo from the past. It is a living idea shaping the future. Across Africa, a powerful tide is rising. For decades, outside powers thrived on a familiar strategy: divide, and control. But today, that era is being challenged. The resources at stake are immense: oil, diamonds, lithium, uranium. Namibia shines with vast uranium reserves and natural gas potential. Botswana stands tall as Africa's city of diamonds, its soil among the richest on earth, and Zambia, world-renowned as one of the largest copper producers, carries wealth in its very ground. Now imagine these three nations, Namibia, Botswana, and Zambia, not as isolated states, but as one united front. Analysts say such a partnership could transform their ability to protect resources and dictate fair terms with the outside world. We've already seen hints of this shift in the Sahel, where leaders chose to build their own defense networks free from the shadow of foreign military bases. That decision, observers report, sent ripples of concern across Washington, where the prospect of losing influence over Africa's markets has not gone unnoticed. Critics warn that campaigns of pressure and propaganda could follow. They point to events in Mali and Burkina Faso, where coups and instability were viewed by many as attempts to fracture independence movements. But history reminds us no empire can stop a people determined to chart their own destiny. And across Africa, that determination is echoing louder than ever. Namibia, Botswana, and Zambia may stand at the center today, but the vision stretches far beyond their borders. This momentum connects directly to the African Continental Free Trade Area, the largest trade zone in the world by membership. Powerful interests will not quietly watch as Africa reclaims its narrative, yet momentum is shifting. From the Sahel to southern Africa, leaders and citizens are rejecting imposed borders and daring to draw a new map, one built on freedom, opportunity, and dignity. Supporters argue the logic is simple. A united bloc negotiates from strength. If Botswana bargains for its diamonds alone, leverage is limited. But if Botswana stands alongside Namibia, Zambia, and others, speaking with one voice, their power multiplies. This, advocates say, is how Africa can move beyond exploitation, reduce corruption, and finally convert natural riches into prosperity for its people. But there is caution too. Analysts remind us that when outside powers arrive as development partners, they rarely do so without expecting returns. Partnerships may offer benefits, but history suggests that believing foreign aid comes free of self-interest is unrealistic. The United States itself serves as a striking example. 50 states bound together, negotiating on the global stage as a single force. Africa, supporters argue, deserves the same unity, and the dream doesn't stop in southern Africa. Many envision the East African Federation as the next step, with the possibility someday of a united African superpower, a future where the continent is no longer spoken for, but speaks for itself. Still, history warns the road will not be easy. Leaders who champion this cause may face threats, pressure, even blackmail, yet the advocates of unity insist fear cannot be allowed to dictate Africa's destiny. They argue that life itself is fleeting, so why allow fear of loss to hold back the promise of freedom? What matters is to act now to shape a future worthy of the next generation. One day, when history is written, they believe the names of today's leaders and citizens will stand recorded as the architects of Africa's rebirth. From the deserts of the Sahel to the rich lands of Namibia, Zambia, and Botswana, many believe a revolution is underway, not one of blood, but of vision, solidarity, and sovereignty. This revolution, they say, belongs not to a single nation, but to all Africans. And if it succeeds, it could redraw the destiny of an entire continent.